Speaker recognizes Representative Arbit.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Permission to speak to the entire package?
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, hate violence is different from other kinds of violence because it is terroristic in nature. There is never just one victim of a hate crime. An entire community is victimized too. Hate crimes tell all those who share a victim's identity, people like you aren't welcome. People like you don't belong. People like you aren't safe. That's why, amidst rising hate crimes in the state of Michigan, we're rising up too to fight it. Today is a day that I have dreamt about for so long, because today we can finally begin to say that we are transforming the state of Michigan from a national laggard to a national leader on hate crimes prevention, intervention, and response.
It would appear that Michigan has passed into the tyrannical period. Michigan House of Representatives, which has recently switched from a Republican majority to a Democratic majority, now joins a Democrat Senate and a Democrat governor, giving the full-scale trifecta necessary to pass full-scale tyrannical legislation, which is, in fact, what is happening right now, as Michigan House of Representatives has just passed HB 4474, which will go down in history as the infamous bill that it is. What we do here on the Traditional Press is we talk about the state of the world today from the lens of a traditionalist perspective. And that means traditional monarchy. The whole point of being a traditionalist is that we can look at history and we can analyze it and we can say that every period in human history has had something that it is good for, something that it does very well. And we as traditionists prefer the time when we were good at morals. Yes, indeed, we have a lot of technology today, but technology does not make for a better life. Only morals are capable of doing that, because only the inner man is of any real value or importance. And the inner man here is exactly what we've got to talk about with the passage of HB 4474. Because what this bill does is it criminalizes the use of your language. Most of us probably by now are going to be familiar with the fact that Michigan has passed this law, but it's important to talk about from the lens of a monarchist perspective, from a traditionalist worldview, because what they've done is, of course, given a $10,000 fine as the maximum penalty for the use of the wrong pronouns. If you consistently use someone's wrong pronouns, they can take you to jail if they feel as though you are harassing them on the basis of their sex. This is, of course, part of the slew of anti-discrimination laws, which the left has wanted for a long time and has been successfully legislating throughout the past few decades. They have been successful in everything that they've attempted. The left has won every single battle so far that they've attempted. They are still working on a few things. They're still working on fully legalized abortion across the nation, and they've kicked that one back to the states, and they are winning via state legislature abortions. And Michigan just recently passed a bill allowing for the legalization of abortions, because of course now it's up to the states, and this particular state that I live in, unfortunately, is now in the tyrannical period. And if you're not familiar with what I mean when I say the tyrannical period, what I'm referring to is a concept called the cycle of nations. Once you kick off your monarchistic rulers from their governance of a nation, you will inevitably set up an aristocratic form of government. Typically, that is a highly selective and restrictive republic. Only certain people are allowed to vote. Only certain people are allowed to participate in government. In this nation, it was straight white landowners were the only people who were allowed to participate in government. And even before that, it was only Protestant landowners that were allowed to participate in government. And then eventually all of that fell away and more people were allowed to participate in government. And that's, of course, the history of the transition from the aristocratic period, which is otherwise known as a meritocracy, to the oligarchical period. And then from the oligarchical period, we transition to, of course, rule by the rich, which is what oligarchs mean. And then we transition in the cycle of nations from oligarchic to democratic. That happened during the Civil War, the transition from the oligarchical party to the Democratic Party in this country. And then, of course, from the Democratic Party, we get the real full-scale, absolute 100% tyrant. And we all know that the Democratic man is tyrannical in his inability to tolerate any dissent or opinions that he disagrees with or that he finds uncomfortable. And it's really important that we understand this, because otherwise bills like this, anti-hate speech, anti-pronoun usage speech, which has passed the House, and because the Michigan Senate is Democratic and the governor is Democratic, it's pretty much guaranteed to pass, because we don't have a context for why this stuff is happening. Without an understanding of the cycle, it's extremely important that we look at what's going on from the proper lens. Otherwise, we'll never really get it. We'll never really understand what the end game is. Where does this all end up? Eventually, it ends up, of course, in a very Orwellian world where anything that you say or do, actually, well, pretty much all the dystopias, anything you say or do can be used against you, and they can twist and manipulate your words in order to convict you of anything. And that is, of course, a very tyrannical thing to do. Now, the concept of the cycle of nations comes from Plato. Plato is the first person to have ever developed this theory. He's the first person to have ever realized that it was a real thing. And of course, we as later lesser historians and lesser philosophers, necessarily, we're talking Plato here, are just picking up from where he left off, and we're sort of understanding this concept. How can this come to be? Well, what's going to happen now is Michigan has passed full-scale abortion, and Michigan has now, in the process, has begun and will complete the passage of this speech impediment bill. It's almost hard to even name it because it's so incredibly tyrannical. This extremely tyrannical bill, because, of course, they can target you for any amount of public opinion expression that you post, and you can get up to a $10,000 fine for harassing someone. And that law is going to be used liberally to target political opponents first, and then it's going to be used maybe moderately to target you and I. And we have to remember that this whole thing has not really ever been about protecting the rights of the alphabet people. It has always been about destroying the oligarchical party, which is the Republican Party. And that's the purpose of a $10,000 fine, because the best way to destroy your opponents is to take all of their money and use it for yourself. And the more political you are, the greater a target you are, so the more likely you are to receive the negative backlash that is going to come from, or I should say, the criminal penalties that are going to come from this particular bill, because, well, that's just what's going to happen. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised that lawmakers write a law and then the executives enforce the law. We shouldn't be surprised that this law is going to be enforced. It's going to be heavily enforced. And it's the beginning of full-scale tyranny in this country, or in this particular state. And with this passage is going to follow many, many, many more states. So Michigan is no longer a purple state. Michigan is now very, very blue. And it can't really be relied upon to win elections anymore or anything like that. So, once you go blue, you never go back, right? Like, that's it. You don't swing back and forth, like, unless you get a massive influx of traditionalist immigration or something. It's going to be really, really hard. Like, if you can get a lot of the more traditional Hispanic families that are coming in from the southern nations into a nation or into a country, usually they start off by voting blue, and then the traditional values and their integration with their culture, they start to see what the blue that they've been voting for actually stands for, and they're like, ew, gross, no, why would we do this? This is anti-family. And of course the Hispanic community is very pro-family, so it's very anti-blue, and so eventually you'll be able to get a more traditional voting block. That's one way that it can happen. It can happen also from, people, conservatives leaving states like California, moving to another state. You can swap it that way. But generally speaking, as long as the population remains pretty, status quo level, you're going to end up with a state fully going into blue Magoo and never ever coming back out of that. Once you go blue, it's pretty much impossible. And the reason for that is something that I can't say on YouTube, or they will take my video down. But I think you all know what I mean. Once the Democrats get involved, forget it. You're never going to be able to do the thing necessary in order to get you-know-who back into political office. But can't say that on YouTube, or I will get another video taken down. And you only get 4 strikes on YouTube, and then you are a gunner. They chop your whole channel down right at the legs, and that's it for you. So not going to go there, but you know what I mean. So, with this bill passing, we have to recognize where we're at right now. And what that means is we need to take very serious thought. We need to stop. We need to just calm down about all this, right versus left stuff. Take a breather, step back, and really think about what the future of this state is going to look like. Because once you introduce a full-scale tyrannical government, you should expect tyranny. Just think about that for a minute. Going to the polls to get your guy is not going to work anymore. It's not the solution. You can't just say, well, in 4 years, we'll get them next time, boys. No, you won't. You're never getting that back. Like, it's over. It's done. It's done. Once you go into tyranny, the tyrants are very, very good at keeping themselves in power. And they exercise a lot of different tools in order to maintain their positions of authority. A lot of things that they can do. So, like, for example, our current governor is never going to stop being an extremely powerful voice within the political party of the United States. Just like ex-President Obama is still an extremely powerful presence within the Democratic Party and within the entire political schema of the United States, even though he doesn't hold elected office. He doesn't need to, because once you've achieved a certain level of power, you're able to work behind the scenes in ways that, the specific technical details don't really matter, but we know that they're doing it in order to get their policies enacted, in order to get their guys working. Basically it's like, the mafia boss behind the scenes, and you're seeing the little peons, the enforcers out there on the streets, but you're not going to see the boss because he's way far back, and you don't need to be governor in order to be the boss. But that's just the way it's working right now. Eventually, the tyrant will be very, very public, and we'll be able to see exactly who and what he or she is. Dare I use the wrong pronouns, I face $10,000 in fines. Nevertheless, that's what we should expect. And so we need to take really seriously a hard look at this state and think about a plan of how to mitigate the tyranny that's going to come down, because it can be really painful in like a lot of ways. They can freeze your bank accounts. like the flip of a switch. Like, it's crazy. They can take anything they want from you, and they can do all of this stuff with legal pretenses. And they don't even really need, of course, legal pretenses, as we see with the January 6th people. You can imprison them without due process and go after everything they've ever owned. And even if they get, I don't know, some GoFundMe money in order to help with legal expenses, you can confiscate that too. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Thanks, guys. So if you're very, very political right now on the conservative side of things, I would be very careful if I were you. And I would really take a step back, and I would really start to think about how to mitigate this stuff, because being in a blue state is a dangerous thing. It's not so dangerous right now, which means that now is the perfect time to plan. It's the perfect time to come up with an idea. It's the perfect time to think about what are we going to do in order to be able to escape this tyranny, in order to be able to do something about this tyranny. It's really important. You guys, that's your job, You're out there, you got to protect your family. You got to be able to think about these things in order to be able to take that next step, whatever that is for you. I can't tell you what that is. Only you can know. It's your situation. You're the one that's going to make those kinds of decisions. But we do need to stick together. That's for sure, because this is a really difficult and dangerous time for us, and there's safety in numbers. So we do 100% need to stick together, but we got to start making real plans, and it can't involve thinking that we're just going to get a Republican governor next time. Like, that can't be part of the discussion, because that's not going to work. That particular plan is over. That time of our lives, that was a functional, a legitimate method that we could employ 15 years ago, 20 years ago, however many years ago. But that plan isn't going to work anymore for all of the reasons that you are very well aware of, and I am very well aware of as well.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
So, with that, we're going to be done. Thank you guys for watching the Traditional Press. Tremendously appreciate it. You're awesome. I love you guys. Drop a sub if you can for me. That would just help me out more than you can imagine. Really appreciate it. Stay strong out there, and I'll catch you all next time.
This has been the Traditional Press Podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for more traditional ideas and exploration of the why behind the what.